handsome young knight is madly in love with a princess, and he's totally unable to bring up his love. So one day he asks, "Oh, will wonders ever cease? Is it better to speak or to die?" Blessed be the mystery of love.
I'll never have the courage to ask a question like that.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Awards Watch Oscar podcast. I'm your host, Eric Anderson. This is podcast number 59, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have the senior editor at New York Magazine and Vulture, Kyle Buchanan. Hello, Kyle.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me.
I'm elated to have you back on the show. I love it.
Wow, I got elated.
Yes, I think that was. I think that was the best word for it. So it is December 5th, and we are going to dive into what has been the last 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of this section of award season. As we've had just this week, the Los Angeles Film Critics, New York Film Critics, NBR, National Board Review last week, the Gotham Awards, and the Independent Spirit nominations. And I just kind of want to dive straight in from the top, and that is looking at LA's pick for Call Me By Your Name last week, and in conjunction with that, the director tie and Timothée Chalamet's win as well. Justin Chang wrote up in his like post LA critics vote that it might look a little predictive their year this year, but not to kind of make it look like that. But it's hard not to when it does look a little rubber stamped, as he said, and very possible.
You know, I mean, I guess I understand why they feel a little sensitive to that, because, you know, they're all on Twitter, they're checking the reactions, and LA often will have one or two left field picks. That said, as far as the movies that are in the award season race this year, it's a really eclectic bunch with no real overly prescribed frontrunner, and I think that we'll see that reflected in the critics groups. So while I guess it might be perceived by some as more rubber stampy than usual, there wasn't, to me, any sort of, I just remember the year that all of the critics groups were giving their top prize to the artist. That was the definition of a rubber stamp. You know, for between New York and LA to be giving their plaudits to a really diverse array of movies, I think is laudable. You know, in lieu of like some left field shock, I think it's perfectly fine for them to deliver results like that.
Yeah, I love the wins, just both in terms of movies that I like, but just I really like how it all broke down.
Yeah. Like if LA had wanted to give Best Supporting Actor to O'Shea Jackson Jr. in Ingrid Goes West, I would have been down for it. But you know, it's fine. It's fine the way that they wanted to go. I don't have a lot of complaints with this award season crop. I think that if the movies get nominated that I think are going to get nominated, I'm fond of or impressed by the ambition of almost all of them.
I totally agree. That. Yeah, when I look at the breakdown here, I'm like, I kind of think no matter how this shakes out, at least me personally, I'll be kind of happy with it. Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yes.
I was a little surprised with Sally Hawkins' win at LA. She has won there before, but that is so often the area that they do make those kind of left field choices. It's very often a foreign language film performance, and if there's a Korean one there, just like mark it down. So I mean, I was looking a little left of what they went with, you know, like Daniela Vega,
Sure.
And that didn't kind of come out. And I was I was really kind of hoping for it too, because I felt like she is so far off the radar now that this would have been a really good opportunity. But
Yeah, perhaps so. Although at the same time, Eric, I would think that as somebody who's been following the season so avidly, maybe you were surprised by Sally Hawkins taking it, because I think a lot of people had suddenly been writing off that movie based on, I don't know, a perceived lack of award season oomph in between Venice and now.
Absolutely, and anybody that has read anything that I've written, I said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And I said it after each of these, the NBR and New York Film Critics announced. When there was this total lack of Shape of Water and Three Billboards, I was like, what is going on? What's happened between now and then? And then said, LA's going to really kind of have to give a boost and save it, and here we are.
When I saw, so many of the potential Best Actress contenders screened up at Toronto, where I saw practically all of them. And when I came out of that, I thought to myself, in a vacuum, I think Sally Hawkins could win this. Which is to say that there are so many strong performances that you have to look for the one that's most unique. The one that feels maybe even the most technically accomplished. And I thought that would be the mute woman who, is communicating via sign language and falls in love. All of these things felt very sort of intriguing to an Oscar voter. I still think it's possible. But I don't know anymore, because we don't live in a vacuum. And our cultural moment has been changing. Not just outside of Hollywood, but obviously inside Hollywood. Hollywood is being remade right now. And so it isn't just, and I've been saying this recently, it isn't just that we don't have, hard and fast front runners in a lot of these top races. It's that you have to think to yourself, what is an Oscar voter, what's even going to be at the forefront of their mind in January and February when they start to vote on these things? What will the world look like? And if the world is practically unrecognizable from what it was 2 months ago, and I think in a lot of ways, the last 2 months in Hollywood have been so wild and unpredictable and going in a way that we can't necessarily see the end point of. This is just a very wordy way to say, I don't know what ground we'll be standing on in January and February. And I think that Oscar voters, especially in the Trump era, are going to want to pick movies and performances that they feel by recognizing them will indicate something, will say something. It's not just about the quality of the work, though that's always important. It's about, what do I feel, whether it's a pat on the back or a message I can convey to the world, will happen if I vote for this. So it's so hard to say. It is. Shape of Water, I do think that there's a narrative that they could construct there. The con when it comes to Sally Hawkins and Best Actresses, in this year where women have found their power and remade Hollywood, is the right performance to reward the mute woman. That would be sort of the con. But on the other hand, this is a woman who is sexually harassed in her movie and finds power and topples, the complacent asshole straight white dude with the help of a lot of other people who have been unfairly dismissed or are minorities. So there is a very relevant storyline that you could thematically tie to the moment that we're going through.
I think you're absolutely right. And when you just said, what the world's going to be like in 2 months, I'm like, I don't know what it's going to be like in 2 days.
Yeah.
That's just the era that we live in, just socially and politically right now, where I don't know. I can't see anything compared to last year, for example. Even though we were at the beginning of, a Trump presidency, the impact that it's been in over the last year is beyond scope, really. So 2 months could be tremendously like 2 years.
Well, I genuinely feel that if Hillary Clinton had won, then La La Land would have. This takes nothing away from the quality of Moonlight, which is an exceptional film, one of my very favorites of last year, and one of the Academy's very favorites, which was borne out in every way, but especially when you spoke to voters. They were always saying, love La La Land, love Moonlight, and then a little bit of Manchester by the Sea. So between those two were the definite frontrunners all season. But you don't do what La La Land did, which is tie the all-time record of Oscar nominations and then lose Best Picture suddenly without something having changed. And the something that changed is the world around us and the world outside of the Oscars. It no longer felt like a responsible thing to do to vote for this retro-leaning homage of a movie. Instead, right here, you had a gift on a silver platter. You had Moonlight, which is an extremely contemporary movie, a forward-leaning movie that was incredibly made, that the industry already loved. And it just felt like that was the right choice to say something, to indicate something, to push something forward after something had been taken away in the world.
Yeah, and it's funny because when people say that they don't think that, the Academy or voters care what people think, I totally disagree, because they do make choices that they feel are going to make a certain statement. And
they do. They make emotional choices. I honestly think last year, I don't think Academy voters were weighed by hot takes on Slate.com about La La Land. They were swayed by what was going on in the world. And the one thing that I would almost pinpoint as emblematic of that was I remember Mark Duplass wrote an editorial about how we have to recognize Moonlight. Like, we have to. We can't not in this moment in time. Yes. And I think he was articulating something that a lot of voters felt emotionally and intellectually.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it was a really funny time last year with this in that all of we went through all the critic stuff and its own think pieces and our own predictions and stuff, but if you look back at the films that voters and other actors, directors, celebrities were talking about, and most especially tweeting about, it was Moonlight more than anything. And that was, again, in hindsight, kind of a thing where, like, okay, here's actual, people talking passionately about what they want to see succeed, versus like the secret voter ballot stuff.
But you can't mistake the Twitter discourse for voter sentiment. They're so different. You know, like, if you had said that you loved La La Land on Twitter last year, then you would have been drawn into, a major online fracas, and it just was not the same. I think that it's so easy to be swayed by online groupthink. It's so easy to be swayed by whatever the most recent development was, something could happen at the Golden Globes, and then suddenly we'll announce that this movie we've been high on is ailing, or vice versa. And the thing that I just keep coming back to, and the thing that I think is helpful when I do my job is, I go to all these events, I meet all these Oscar voters. They're by and large old. They're trying to get a more youthful lineup in there, but they're still by and large old. Mm-hmm. They're very excited to have free lunches and to take selfies with celebrities and to bring their son or nephew to meet Kate Winslet. So I just think about these people. These people are, they don't know that the Twitter takes even exist, and I try to separate not just my own feelings on the movies from what I think Oscar voters are going to go for, but everybody else's feelings. I try to really zero in on, the 75-year-old woman with the leopard print cardigan who is just really excited to meet Gary Oldman, because he's voting. I love
that, and I love your insight, and that's why I'm so happy to have you on today, because it's something that from the outside, and I'm on the outside of that, that I also look to. I look to those insights, but in a way that is, hopefully constructive. Sometimes, people get really adamant and kind of crazy and be like, well, I've talked to voters. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's cool. But I like hearing anecdotes more like that, because that that's going to be where those voters are coming from too.
And they explain a lot. I mean, an example I give of this, and I apologize if you've heard me say it before, is when Sylvester Stallone lost for Creed. Mm-hmm. Now, this is something that, like, on paper seems blessed by God to have him win an Oscar. He's returning to this role that he was nominated for decades earlier and did not win.
It was a great narrative.
Yeah, a wonderful comeback narrative for him to finally get to win for this role in a category that didn't have a very strong alternative. So everybody thought he was the front runner, in part because a lot of the pundits are people our age, especially dudes, who grew up on these movies, and so there was an irresistible comeback narrative for them as well, to experience this and to root for him. But the thing is, when you go to these parties and you talk to people about Sylvester Stallone, a lot of them just don't like him. Mm-hmm. Over those decades, they'd had run-ins with him or personal experiences with him that made them not want to vote for him. I remember one person said at one of these lunches, told me, Sylvester Stallone is the most hated man at my country club. And if you met the other guys at my country club, you'd understand what that means. And so you have to think about stuff like that. A lot of the time people lose because of it. When Burt Reynolds lost, when Eddie Murphy lost, these are people who had antagonized enough people in the industry that even though they gave performances that felt like they ought to be Oscar winners, people just didn't want to vote for them. And so I think you got to think about that, especially this year. There may be a front runner in one of the categories where he doesn't have, like, where there were bumps in the road.
I can't imagine who you would be talking about.
You have to think about, who wants to vote for him. And if they vote in any category, not just that one, you have to think about, okay, do I want to vote for this person? Am I going to be excited and happy to see them on stage making a speech? And what will it say about me, the Academy, and the industry if this person wins? These are important things to figure out above and beyond the quality of the performance or movie.
That is absolutely correct. And it actually then makes me want to circle back to Timothée Chalamet, related or unrelated to that previous conversation.
I think Timothy could win this. I genuinely think so, and I'm surprised to say it, only in that when I saw this movie last January at Sundance, I loved it, no secret. I think he's fantastic in it, but again, I'm so broken record about this, because I've been saying it for years. The Academy does not tend to reward young men, not at least in the way that they reward young women. When it comes to men under 25, young male actors, oh sorry, my dog has opinions on it too. When it comes to young male actors under 25, they're almost never nominated. That's why I was not terribly bullish on Lucas Hedges getting nominated last year. He did. That's encouraging.
I felt okay about that, but more because of his category. It's the lead category that is just so difficult.
But even getting guys into supporting wasn't happening. And meanwhile, you can't throw a rock without hitting an Oscar year where one or several young women are nominated. So yeah, I was very concerned that Timothy would even get nominated, that people would see that performance and justly reward it, especially because in January you're looking down the pike and it seems like every giant male movie star has an Oscar movie coming out. Mm-hmm. But then a lot of those flopped. And it's a thin category ultimately, Best Actor, and I think that he and Gary Oldman will be the chief rivals, that Chalamet obviously has the critical edge, and I don't know. People are very excited about him. They like to invest. You know, he is a young American actor who's turned in a fantastic performance that anchors that movie, that you literally leave the movie thinking about, given the final shot. Mm-hmm. I think that he is as strongly positioned to take this as he could be. It just is going to depend on a few other factors that don't involve him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when he was able to win both LA and New York, I said, okay, I've had him in 2 and 3, and I'm have him in number 1 right now. I'm trying each year to rely less and less on history and statistics, because they keep kind of dissolving and not really having any real impact. And I mean,
they do. You just can't be completely beholden to them.
No, definitely
because every year rewrites those trends and statistics in ways that constantly surprise, as Moonlight did last year. I mean, movies don't win Best Picture having not picked up the key precursors that Moonlight missed.
Yes.
And movies don't lose Best Picture
when they had them all.
That La La Land had gotten. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm always excited and encouraged by that. Even when I make my final predictions or take part in an Oscar pool, I like being wrong, because when I'm wrong, it means something exciting and startling happened.
I agree. Unless I try to, and I try hopefully to learn from it after I have banged my head against the wall, and see, and then you usually can see, okay, well, that makes sense now. I do. You're right. He has an uphill battle. Even if he is the front runner, he still has an uphill battle, because he might be able to thrash his way through, everything leading up to Oscar night, but then he has to really contend with, like you said, the voters that don't like to reward young men here.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
But he's the closest. He's the closest thing to a young male actor, or he's the closest thing to an ingenue that a young male actor has offered in a sort of a package or mystique that has come within spitting distance of Oscar.
Absolutely.
And Oscar does love an ingenue.
They do. And for most people, this will be their introduction to him. I think it also helps that he's in Lady Bird. It helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
His visibility will be broader.
And to play a very different role in that, to prove that he's not a fluke. And he has a role that, if the movie pans out, will almost certainly get him nominated next year in Beautiful Boy opposite Steve Carell.
Yeah. Yes, I'm actually really excited for that too.
Yeah.
I think he's also going to be able to secure some international votes too with this role, in his Italian and French, and I think the broadening academy will be able to embrace him maybe a little more than the older academy. I don't know how much that will offset it, but it could be enough.
We'll see. I think he has a stronger shot than people may think. That is independent of, but certainly not hurt at all by, the critics' wins. Yes. It just goes down to passion and who people want to see up there and who they want to invest in. Again, it's saying something about the industry in this moment in time. And to reward Timothée Chalamet is saying something promising and hopeful about the industry. And after the year that Hollywood has had, wouldn't it be nice to say something like that? Yeah. So you have to factor those things in. This is not to take anything away from Gary Oldman's performance, which I actually think is great.
I do too.
I don't love the film so much. I'm very sort of shruggy about it. But I genuinely think it is great. A great performance, a playful performance. I believed it. I even believed it underneath all the makeup. So it's not to take anything away from that.
No, but I'm 100% with you on that.
It does feel a little bit to me as though Darkest Hour, which is a very traditional Oscar movie in so many ways, maybe it's coming into the wrong year to be that movie, because people just aren't as psyched about it. And I think even the limited box office sort of reflects it. It's doing fine, but it's not pulling in the numbers that, an Imitation Game would have pulled in a few years ago.
Or The King's Speech.
The King's Speech was, a soon-to-be Best Picture winning juggernaut, which I don't think this would have been under most circumstances anyway.
No, definitely not. Their rollout was just similar.
Yeah.
But I mean, at this time, Colin Firth had won New York and L.A.
Yeah.
So it's hard then to look at Oldman and go, okay, maybe he's not the front runner. I don't know. There's chinks in armor all the time, and every week kind of does that. And even though I hate to be super reactionary to all of them, I know that I still am. Each thing kind of starts weaving a narrative to keep through the season, and then once the season is kind of over and all you have left is the waiting time between votes and the show, is then, in terms of predicting, then is actually the hard work. I think the hardest time is that period.
I think everything we're about to see, it matters, but it matters more when it comes to visibility for those movies and performances that win. You can still be snubbed or left out of something at this point and go on to Oscar nominations or sometimes even Oscar wins. Yes. It's important to remember that we're still not even really getting into industry people until SAG weighs in. SAG is always, such an important bellwether of how this is really going to go.
I'm weirdly enough, I'm so, not that I'm down on SAG, but because it is just a random group of 2,200 people voting on nominations. Most of the time they are so screener dependent that that's where you get really wacky nominations, like Sarah Silverman.
Yes, well, but I think with SAG, in most of the acting races, you can take typically 4 out of 5 of the nominees in a category to the bank.
Yes.
And then there will be one extra where you're like, I guess that campaign paid off. We'll see what happens this year. I'm very curious. I don't think. I'm semi-confident in my picks, but I don't feel like the categories are as locked down as they were any other year that I've been doing this.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was really weird last year when supporting actress went 5 for 5 all the way at SAG, Golden Globe, and Oscars. That was so unusual. And we're certainly not going to see anything like that this year.
Yeah, well, in some ways that's good because it means that there are more worthy performances that could be nominated in that category. Last year, it just felt like, who else even is there in a lot of ways?
Yes.
So yeah, but we'll see. I'll be happy if I got it right, and I'll be excited if I got them wrong.
Yeah, I did SAG predictions a couple of weeks ago, and then I'm going to do them this weekend. And actually, I've got a SAG Golden Globe podcast for this weekend too, because that's just how this week is going to go. Yeah. But yeah, I'm going to look at my ones from a few weeks ago and go, all right, how much has changed? Because it might be a lot.
Oh yeah.
What was your take on the Post winning as much as it did from the National Board of Review? I know that most...
Am I allowed to even talk about the Post?
We can do social sentiment. And
can I just quote my own tweets?
Yes, and tomorrow's official reviews.
Allow me a rant against the whole social sentiment thing. It still seems absurd to me that I can't discuss Phantom Thread, a movie that I'm now seeing show up with plenty written about it on top 10 lists.
Yes.
So people are allowed to write what they think on top 10 lists, but I still can't even tweet. It seems absurd to me. Yeah, especially because I think a lot of the people that are waiting to weigh in on Phantom Thread were super into it. You would think they'd want that reputation out there, given the nominations and the voting that's going on.
Yeah, I don't really do reviews very much at all, but I did, just tweet quick thoughts about it right after I saw it. I think I saw it Thursday. And I adore it. I love it. I love it. But yes, this creation of the phrase social sentiment is really kind of annoying and silly.
Yeah. What was my take on the post with NBR?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't put a lot of stock into NBR, to be honest with you.
Yes, and I think most of us don't, and that's kind of they just are who they are because they're always first and they're really old and whatever. Right. But it's like nobody knows who they are.
I mean, I've met some of them.
Really?
Yes, and so I continue to have very little stock.
I sort of took it as the academics within the group, because sometimes, you know, when I'm doing a prediction for NBR, I look at their list of the types of people that are members, and it's sort of in my head, it's very like bookish librarian kind of like people. And
no, they're not all like that. Trust me.
Okay.
There's somewhere it's like you're not old enough. You should not be old enough to be an NBR member. Member.
Then that's the part in their description of that's film enthusiasts, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, it's a real random assemblage of people. But yeah, it's tricky with things like that, where it's a little bit more shadowy as to who makes them up. You know, even the Hollywood Foreign Press. But again, it's like, if you're a journalist and you ever sit in on roundtables at a press day, that's when you meet the Hollywood Foreign Press members. Yeah. They are the people at the roundtable who have one question, and it's like, "Hi, I'm from Guatemala, and I'm writing for my Guatemalan paper, and I'd like to know, have you ever been to Guatemala, and would you shoot a movie there?" These are the people who vote for the Golden Globes. So, yeah, you know, I mean, I think maybe this is turning out to be the theme of this conversation. But I really do think you have to look at the people who are voting and think about them and think, okay, if I were this person, how would I vote? What is this sort of person interested in? What is this sort of person not interested in? You know, certainly with critics groups, it's easier and easier to find out this stuff. Which used to be sort of like closely guarded secrets, but now everybody's just tweeting it out and telling you who was the runner-up and all that anyway. And you know going in, like, oh, this critic doesn't like this movie, and so this movie might not do as well with this group. But yeah, I mean, everyone's got biases. Like, I hope that I can keep mine separate from how I actually cover and predict, but not all of them do. There's an awards editor at one of the trades who automatically not just demotes but blanks a movie if he feels it's anti-Catholic, and once left out Spotlight from his predictions. I saw this year on Cold Derby he just completely has blanked Three Billboards.
Yes,
because the Frances McDormand character goes on a anti-church rant, and it's like, yeah, but dude, you have a big position covering award season at a major trade. You can't let your personal feelings, you know, affect that sort of thing. But yeah, they do. I mean, they do. I hope that at the very least people can keep their own loves and predictions separate. And if they can't do that, that they can at least be transparent about them so that people can, you know, use their decoder rings and figure this shit out for their
Well, sometimes it's not. When you're looking at like a cross section of, you know, predictors in one space, and then you have this sort of like, you know, one thing doesn't look like the other. Yeah, you're.
Well, there's some wild characters in this line of work.
Yes.
As I'm sure you know, as I'm sure anybody who's listening to this would know, there are some wild characters.
Yes, it's really fun, and I watch and I follow so many of them, and it's as entertaining as the season itself. Really,
it's nice. It's nice to be entertained by it.
That is a good way to
actively
put it.
choose to be entertained by it.
Yes. Yeah. So NBR. All right. Bah. Something I don't want to act like that early Shape of Water thing because we've only been, you know, to 3 awards, but I'm looking at Get Out, which is 1 screenplay wins, But that's it. I'm a little surprised that.
Well, it's also one sort of first film and breakthrough type thing.
Yes, yes. I guess I'm a little surprised, but then I look at the categories, and supporting, maybe Catherine Keener would have gotten in, lead actor.
It's possible she could.
I think she could. She's pretty famous for doing that.
Yeah. I mean, the optics, if she's the only performer from that film to be nominated, wouldn't be great.
Exactly.
But we'll see what happens. It's possible. I'm looking to SAG to clarify that. If it were going to happen, it would happen there.
I completely agree. I think that is where she would show up. I mean, I think Daniel Kaluuya could show up at SAG.
I hope he does.
I do too.
Think that performance is so good. His bullshit detector as a performer and as a character is so important. My worry there is that the star of the movie is Jordan Peele instead of the actual stars of the movie.
Yeah.
And also that the performance is a reactive one, and sometimes I think the Academy underrates reactive performances, especially when men deliver them. They like active performances where the characters are sort of agents of the plot and of their own destiny, which that character eventually becomes, but not for a while. So I feel like, yeah, there are elements to that performance where I really do hope that people understand and grasp what he's doing and what he does so well, but it's hard to say if they will or not.
Yeah, it's tough because, I mean, his very character is taken, his will is basically taken from him, so he's not able to make the proactive decisions that, a hero actor would essentially make. But yeah, it's you're right. In a weird way, it's to me a little bit like Sally Hawkins, where she has to use other elements and other parts of her role and performance because she's not able to speak. And he kind of does the same thing. He's got an insanely expressive face, and I just think he's amazing. I would really love to see him go far.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the inherent tensions of the movie, which is present in almost every scene, is that these microaggressions are committed against him on a daily basis, and he has to weigh whether it's worth engaging in, And I think an actor who wasn't as skillful as him, who didn't have that connection with the camera and audience as him, would not be able to sell the accumulation of all of those things and make each single one of them feel suspenseful and fresh in the way that he does. And it's crucial to nail that because that is the theme of the film in so many ways.
And speaking of nailing it, I was just looking at your Twitter earlier, and you have that LA Times, full page for Get Out. Get Out is the movie for the world we live in today, and that speaks directly to what you were talking about earlier about who is the Academy and how do they feel right now, and I think that, and then your follow up to that just says the same thing basically, and that's what it'll come down to. What are we representing?
The Best Picture winner will come down to the movie that can most effectively claim to be the movie of today, and that is dangerous for a film like Dunkirk.
Yes. I almost don't even want to go into that, but it's very true. I think if you are correct, then it almost makes the choice of Get Out completely inevitable, because I think it is the movie that speaks the loudest and does zero in.
I mean, I was sort of biding my time with Get Out. I wanted to see how effectively they'd be able to relaunch that in the fall as an award season contender, and they've done such a bang-up job. Even the controversy over whether it's a comedy or drama, that reestablished it as a contender in such a key way, and I thought it was sort of a have your cake and eat it too moment where they can compete as a comedy, which I think is a fair designation. Potentially win and get nominated for more hardware than they would the other way around, while at the same time having people argue on the movie's behalf that it's so much more than a comedy, which is, again, exactly the perfect award season narrative that they want. So the two twin things the three things really that Get Out had to do, which are establish itself again, even though it came out so early this year, to claim that it's more than a comedy, and thirdly, to say that it is the movie of today in a way that no other movie is. Well, it's done all of those three things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's why I think that it will do well at SAG and then be able to just kind of push it down the field from there. Okay. Oh my God, did I just use this?
That said, as much as I just was arguing on its behalf, this is the tricky part. I don't think SAG is necessarily going to shed light on its chances. Like we just said, it could be very easily underrated by people, those performances. I don't think it's a natural to be nominated for the top SAG award unless people love it that much. Because there are much more ensemble movies that I think are traditional for SAG in that way. So I'm not really sure where we could start seeing it really, really, really pay off. I think we just have to not underrate it because certain precursors are better designed to reward different movies.
Okay, but where do you stand on the very old, 22-year-old SAG stat about getting that SAG cast nomination in order to win Best Picture?
I mean, yeah, and you can say like, okay, La La Land missed it, and therefore, that's why that showed the lack of support. But I genuinely do think the only reason La La Land missed it is because it was such a two-hander. Mm-hmm. They really, really like to give that award or to nominate films for that award that have an expansive cast. And La La Land just didn't, know. And Get Out does, but compared to some of these other films that are so ensemble, that are so full of character actor moments, there's just more SAG-friendly films than that. I really think Get Out is strongest when it comes to its writing and directing, and that again goes to what I said. The star of Get Out, and the absolute star of Get Out, if you go to any room or party or event that he's in, is Jordan Peele. People are super into Jordan. He is the person who's fronting this movie, especially during the award season phase. Everyone in the industry wants to come up and talk to him and greet him and get excited for him. And so I think, when it comes to the acting, that's not necessarily where they're going to show their esteem. But when it comes to anything where Jordan can be nominated, writing and directing, and then maybe ultimately, picture, I don't know. I think it has a very strong shot at those. I think he'll be nominated for director, and, as long as it stays the course and it continues to be the movie of today, which, again, we don't know. We might know what today is, but we don't know what tomorrow will be 2 months from now. Then it is better positioned to take this than we might have initially give it credit for.
Well, I'll be curious to see what your SAG predictions are then for that, because I feel really pretty strongly for it to be able to get in. A number of factors. I get what you're saying.
You think the cast will be nominated?
Yes, I do.
But do you think it'll get individual nominations?
I think there are outside chances for Kaluuya and Keener, absolutely.
Right. But you think it can get nominated for the top award,
yes,
not getting any individual nominations?
I think it can.
How often does that happen?
Not that much.
Yeah.
That's why I have to really think about that. If
Kaluuya gets in and the movie is nominated for the top spot, then shit. Get Out ought to be considered, by some to be a front runner. But what I'm saying is, even if it doesn't get nominated for those, I don't think we should discount it. I still think that it is extremely strongly positioned in a lot of ways. And it could follow a Moonlight arc where it didn't necessarily get the things that you're supposed to get, but it still felt so important and modern and contemporary to reward it.
And that's kind of what's exciting about this, is that I'm looking at, like, even if it doesn't, that we're in an awards era now that is different, and we could see that just flip.
Yeah, and I mean, I really expect it to, not just because for so many reasons. They're shaking up the membership of the Academy in a way that is new and can lead to more exciting, different picks that don't fall in line with, statistical precedent. And then also because the world is being shaken up. There are just so many X factors that we don't usually have. So to add those ingredients to a race that seems to have so few front runners is just a recipe for anything to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. Gosh, I almost just want to end on this, just talking about Get Out, and that's it.
Is there anything else you wanted to know or curious about?
Well, I mean, I did kind of want to venture possibly a little bit into the things being written around Call Me By Your Name and Three Billboards, but I mean, my God, that could be an entire podcast.
Maybe.
Because not only does it involve those movies, it just kind of involves just Hollywood as a whole and our society as a whole. And I don't want to not give it enough time. So maybe hold off on that for the moment.
Well, I'll give you my thumbnail reaction, although I'm not totally sure. I can maybe intuit what you're asking me about these movies.
Yeah,
but as far as, I mean, there have been a lot of articles written as of late about Three Billboards being problematic. And I'll say about them the same thing I say when people see that I'm predicting Hung Chow to get nominated for Downsizing and say, well, isn't that character problematic? I think that the demographic least likely to find those things problematic is old straight white men, and the Academy, while it is still remaking itself, is full to the majority of straight white men. Mm-hmm. So the demographic that is least likely to be fazed by those hot takes and by those issues is the demographic that is most likely to vote for those movies and performances. So I don't think Three Billboards is going to be necessarily dinged when it comes to the Academy by these hot takes. In the sphere of public perception, maybe. When it comes to the Twitter discourse, well, yeah, I mean, everything takes its lumps. Yeah. But no, I wouldn't discount it with Oscar because of those essays.
That's a really good point, actually. That's a really good point, because I've been trying to kind of wrap my head around this, and mostly just the issue of timing, because Three Billboards is a movie that's been in multiple festivals. The reviews were stellar, and none of these issues were brought up then. And now that
in part, I think that's because fewer people were watching them, yes. And it wasn't the time to do a real deep dive into a movie because, and I find this really irritating a lot of the time, you can't talk about some of the things that are provocative about Three Billboards without getting into the second half of the film, or even the very
spoiler
end
territory.
And who would want to read that, 2 months out from its release?
Yes, that's true.
So yeah, I think it would have been too early to get into those things.
I agree. When I started kind of diving down into the who's and where's they were coming from, I kind of had a thought, much like you just said, that the Academy is still primarily straight white men. So are film reviewers.
Oh yeah.
And once a movie comes out, a broader spectrum of an organization's writers are able to see it and comment on it. So, more non-white, non-male, non-straight people amazingly have opinions too.
Yeah,
so
that's absolutely true.
It's giving a different perspective because it is a different perspective.
Yeah.
Which is, back to the whole Hollywood needs and is going through a shakeup kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think, I have to kind of dial back my own rhetoric because, I've been kind of angry about it and been like, why are these, hit pieces coming out right now and what's going on and blah, blah, blah. And if I'm more thoughtful about it, that's a big reason why. I think it is anyway.
Absolutely. And these movies, if they're going to get talked about, will be talked about in this fashion. Three Billboards is an incredibly provocative, sprawling, often messy movie that is intentionally trying to offend you. We can't be shocked that people are offended by it. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who was mostly positive on that movie, I have a lot of complaints about it, a lot of things that I think just don't work or are facile. But I feel, not everyone feels this way, and I wouldn't take away their right to feel this way, but I can like so much of a movie and not like other parts of it. I can hold those two ideas in opposition. I think that for a lot of people, if one element of a movie sets them off, or if there's one thing they don't like, then it failed, and they turn against it. Mm-hmm. Then hey, if you feel that strongly, who can talk you out of it? But I'll give you an example that I think you'll probably agree with. So I might be preaching to the choir here, but with Call Me By Your Name, there are people who feel that it's too tame. And I feel like even if you do feel that way, if you're mad at that pan to the window as they're about to make love for the first time, did you not like the first hour? Yeah. Are you willing to just bin that first hour because you were mad at the pan? Listen, if it puts the wrong taste in your mouth, then I understand. And I understand a lot of the time where people are coming from when they're like, we should have seen that scene. I like watching a sex scene that reveals something about character and emotions, and I think Luca is very good at making those sorts of scenes. So I don't doubt that if he had shot a sex scene, it would have been really interesting. So if people, are bemoaning the lack of that moment in Call Me By Your Name, to a large extent, I can understand and even get behind it. But to discount the entire movie because of that, and to call the entire movie tame, which it isn't, I really do feel like a movie where Armie Hammer is wiping cum off of his chest after having sex with a boy is not tame. I really think we might be overreacting to like one thing about a film a lot of the time.
Yes, well, this is going to be the Mutual Admiration Society because I am in complete agreement, and for the exact same reasons. The negative reviews that I've read, again, since it came out and not from really before, do just that. They completely reduce the whole movie to that one moment, and therefore everything else is just collateral damage. Yeah, and I don't get that.
There are a lot of years where at the end of the year, when I'm thinking, okay, what were my favorite movies of the year? I have another category, which is the scene I liked least in my favorite movies, and then the scene or performance that I actually really liked in a movie I otherwise didn't. And I think it's kind of healthy to mull those things over because, these movies are made by hundreds of people over often a process of years. There's so much that goes into them. It's my only sort of qualm with the whole notion of auteurism is that these movies are worked on by so many people and they're performed by so many people. So you can have a wonderful movie where there's one performance that just doesn't work. You can have Three Billboards, which is where a lot of those actors are operating on all cylinders, and then you have a what were they thinking Abby Cornish moment.
I was just going to mention that. Oh my god.
So listen, this happens a lot of the time, and so I think I think it's very easy. It's probably even encouraged in today's sort of hot take filled,
Get those clicks.
Twitter-y vibe to cancel a movie or to use such hyperbole that we, like we're going to a different planet.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of room or maybe even money and nuance in sort of plumbing the in-between between those two extremes. But that's where most movies live, Even a perfect movie doesn't get everything right. And it really can't. You talk to the people who made those movies, the director will be like, that scene is not as good as it could have been, but she was sick that day and we didn't get the location we wanted, so we just made the best of it. Mm-hmm. I think to expect a movie to be the best thing anyone's ever made or seen, or a movie that should be immediately dismissed and buried, the more we reward those two extremes, the more difficult it is to have a more interesting and more truthful film discourse.
Yeah, and one of the stranger elements to me of the negative feedback to Call Me by Your Name is like immediately running to like God's Own Country or BPM, or like, see, these movies have sex and this is what sex looks like, rather than appreciating and embracing that we have these three movies plus a dozen other LGBTQ movies, and enjoying each one for what it is, and that there are different ones. There is no one way to do it.
No, it's so exciting because we're usually so starved for this kind of content, which I think is part of the reason why people do this. I think that for gay people who love movies, Manohla Dargis said to me once, sometimes you love the movies even when they don't love you back. And I think that that's true of a lot of gay people. They love movies, they worship movies, even though they don't necessarily see themselves or their experiences reflected in a one-to-one way. Maybe that even strengthens the love, the obsession, the bond, because you're forced to project yourself onto these actors and actresses and ideas and stories that you can find some sort of scrap of identification with, some sort of metaphorical connection. And so to actually get something on screen that is so one-to-one, where it's like, well, here are gay people and they're falling in love and they're doing these things, it's almost startling. And so the bones of these movies can be picked apart in a different fashion because suddenly we're getting things that are actually about lives that we've lived, And so you're getting something that is now suddenly so close to who you are that you complain about the 5 feet away from you that it's not close to you.
That's a great point, and it's totally in line with Vito Russo's Celluloid Closet. Yeah. Where, in earlier days as a gay audience, you're watching movies and you're inserting your life into this and reading between lines because, you're not there. And now here we are. So it's very much like that. Oh, good. This is sort of like a happy ending, and we sort of got to talk about the two things that I wanted to address, but I didn't want to, just reduce them to sound bites. But yeah, that's good. Maybe I'll have to end this podcast with Sufjan Stevens, but I think I've done that a couple of times now. I just want to make everybody cry at the end.
I just talked to Sufjan the other day.
I hate you more than anybody in the world. So, is that for an upcoming piece?
Definitely, but the nature of the piece is still being negotiated. So we'll see what happens.
Cool. On that note, I implore or urge anybody listening, if you have not already, to read Kyle's New Yorker piece on Armie Hammer.
Vulture piece, yeah.
Vulture piece, sorry. It's wonderful. It's I could go on about how much I really love Kyle's writing. So
Well, that's kind of you to say.
I
mean,
I
listen,
do.
I love the movie, and everybody involved with it are thoughtful, interesting people that are easy to talk to, and that reward you going deep with them. And so I feel like I've been able to do that with all of them.
Yeah,
Uh,
I rarely get the opportunities to do that, but I did get to interview Luca and Michael Stuhlbarg a few
yeah,
weeks ago, and it was a 15-minute interview that turned into 30 very naturally. And oh my God, I barely had to say anything because I just got to listen to them, and it was incredible. It was wonderful.
yeah. Well, especially with Luca. I mean, Luca is such a rewarding person to have a conversation with because, I mean, you can see where Army was coming from. He talks in the piece that you're referring to that I wrote about how important his bond with Luca was to him, and how it took on a form of genuine love and jealousy that surprised him. But you want to be your best person for Luca when you talk to him. He really rewards an intellectual curiosity and sort of searching artistic vibe. It spurs you to have really great conversations, and so I kind of get where Army was coming from.
Absolutely.
And I should say also, you know, in the piece that you mentioned, yeah, you're right in that there's so much to talk about here, and that the people who are involved are easy to talk to. You just sort of can ask them things and they'll go. But that's not to sort of devalue the work that you or I do to find out these things and to pry these answers from them. You know, I think there was a recent piece on Mr. Hammer that sort of framed a lot of the reporting and interviews and profiles that had been done on him as essentially, you know, all part of a larger publicity narrative pushed by his team. And, you know, I see that said sometimes even when people are like, oh, you know, I saw some reactions to the piece that I wrote on Army that were like, oh, Army's really campaigning now. And it's like, you know, I really wish people knew the work involved in even getting that article out the door, you know, to securing the interview, to getting him to talk about certain things, to dealing with consequences or potential blowback, and to investigating and going back to talk to people a second time or getting secondaries. Like, we're not just toadies who transcribe a press narrative. We're writers and storytellers, and when we're curious and when we investigate and when we're well matched with the subject, I think that really pays off in a way that should perhaps not be devalued by other journalists.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fantastic sentiment.
I've said my piece.
No, I agree. I think that's wonderful. All right. Well, gosh, now that's actually a really good place to end. That's perfect. That is lovely. Gosh, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah.
Please, everybody, read Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Buchanan, and Vulture, New Yorker, anywhere else that people can find you or that you want to be found.
No, that's plenty.
Okay, perfect. And as always, on Twitter, I am at awards_watch, Facebook, Instagram, fun stuff like that, and awardswatch.com. So until next time, which is actually just going to be a few days, I will say goodbye for today, and thank you very much again, Kyle.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.